Podcast, where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to row-out facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The Bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast, where we tackle the biggest questions and boldest changes facing today's dairy industry. I'm your host, and in this episode, we're diving deep into a reality that every producer, big or small, needs to face now. How China's astonishing 500,000 cow megafarms and advances in lab-grown milk are changing the game for dairies around the world. We'll break down why the missing middle of dairying is shrinking, what this means for your cost structure, and the 3 options every operation must consider during the next 18 months. Whether you're managing 150 cows in the Northeast, 1,200 in Wisconsin, or following the global markets, this episode offers the clarity and actionable insight you need to decide your future before someone or something else decides it for you.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately because the context is everything here. For generations, right, the progression of the dairy farm was kind of a slow climb up the ladder. Your grandfather milked 50 cows, maybe your father built it up to 500, and the underlying economy, well, it supported that incremental growth.
Yeah, it felt manageable. You could see the path forward.
But today, the game has just fundamentally changed. We are talking about global operations that milk 5,000 cows, 50,000 cows, and yes, even up to 500,000 cows. It's a whole different world.
And that fundamental shift in scale, driven largely by, national and global capital, has created what this analysis calls a missing middle crisis. So if you're running an incredibly well-managed operation, say between 500 and 2,000 cows, you are structurally caught. You're stuck. Well, you don't have the sheer volume to tap into those mega-scale economies, the really low costs, but often you're also too large, maybe too invested in infrastructure to pivot quickly into those premium, local, niche markets. You're kind of stranded in the middle.
Exactly. And the central premise of the analysis we're looking at today is that the window for making strategic decisions, the decisions that preserve your farm equity, your family's wealth, it's critically narrow. We're not talking about 5 years out. We're talking about maybe 12 to 18 months right now.
Wow, 12 to 18 months. That's really soon.
It is. And the urgency is driven by a structural disadvantage that's mathematical, not really managerial. This data points to the fact that mid-sized farms face nearly $1 million. Think about that. $1 million in annual structural cost penalties compared to their largest competitor.
Yeah, hold on. Let's really emphasize the stakes here. Why that 18-month window? If I'm sitting here thinking, the milk price cycle will turn around eventually, or, I'll just wait for ideal conditions, what does that waiting actually cost me?
Yeah, what's the price of inaction?
Well, the paper is absolutely brutal on this point. If you wait, you risk substantial equity erosion, massive erosion. We're talking about preserving, say, 85 to 90% of your farm's historical value now, while you're still operating from a position of relative financial strength.
Compared to what?
Compared to maybe getting only 20 to 30% back after you've gone through prolonged periods of operating below your cost of production because of these structural disadvantages. It stops being a conversation about, tweaking efficiency, and it really becomes a question of wealth management. How do you protect what you've built?
That clock is ticking, absolutely. And the decision isn't just about whether to expand anymore. It's about potentially a radical pivot into a niche market or, and this is the really uncomfortable part for a lot of folks, a strategic, well-timed exit.
Right. Not a failure, but a strategic move.
And we're also going to challenge a core industry assumption, something that's been preached for decades, really.
Which one?
The belief that good management can somehow overcome fundamentally poor structural economics. Good management is absolutely essential. Yes, we all agree on that. But when you are starting like $10 per hundredweight in the hole compared to the competition, you need more than just great POW protocols.
Yes, you can't manage your way out of a fundamental cost structure problem of that magnitude.
And let's be clear, the technological disruption. It isn't waiting for anyone. It's already here.
You mean the alternative proteins?
Exactly. We're going to reveal just how quickly that market is maturing, specifically precision fermentation. We're talking about lab-grown milk proteins, whey, casein, that are molecularly identical to the dairy versions.
And they're already in products, like right now.
Right now, on your grocery store shelves today.
Yeah.
And this changes the timetable for every single long-term capital investment decision you might be considering, because it fundamentally shifts the floor on the price of commodity protein, potentially very soon.
Okay, so the pressure is coming from scale, from cost structure, and from new technology. That's a lot.
It is. So let's dive into the details. Let's start with that scale issue, because to really understand the structural disadvantage, you have to grasp the global drivers first. The data on global production is genuinely staggering. It's mind-blowing, actually. And it's heavily influenced by deliberate national policy, particularly in Asia.
Yeah, you see right there in the numbers. 5 of the world's 10 largest dairy operations are now Chinese-owned. This isn't just, farmers gradually growing their herds. This is massive, coordinated capital strategy.
And when we talk scale here, we need to calibrate our definition, right? We're not just talking about a couple thousand cows anymore.
No, not at all. Look at the data from IFCN, the International Farm Comparison Network. Modern Dairy, the world's largest, they manage 472,480 cows, almost 500,000 cows.
Spread across 47 massive farms.
Exactly. And then you have China Shengmu at 256,650, Yili Yuan, Hushan.
Yeah.
They round out that top 5 list. These aren't just regional players. They reflect a deliberate, really aggressive national strategy. China's aiming for 70% milk self-sufficiency by 2030.
Okay, but let's bring it home. Why should the farmer listening in, say, Pennsylvania or maybe Wisconsin or even down in New Zealand or Ireland, why should they care about a Chinese national dairy policy?
Because milk is fundamentally a global commodity. And this massive shift in scale directly impacts global pricing and, crucially, the demand for global whole milk powder.
How much impact are we talking?
China added a huge amount of production, 11 million metric tons, just between 2018 and 2023.
11 million tons. That's more milk than many entire medium-sized dairy nations produce in a year.
You got it. And to put that into perspective for you listening, that new production, it displaced approximately 240,000 metric tons of whole milk powder imports. Tons they simply don't need to buy from external suppliers anymore.
And China's dairy imports have been huge, right? Over $10 billion annually in recent years.
Exactly. And for regions like Oceania, the U.S., places that have really relied on that high-demand market as a crucial growth engine, well, that market is shrinking and shrinking fast.
So every ton they successfully produce at that mega scale internally
is potentially a price point knocked off the global market. It just tightens the margins for everyone else competing in that space.
And this structural shift brings us directly to that structural disadvantage in costs we mentioned. We need to be really specific about these figures because they're stark. When we talk costs, we mean cost per hundredweight, 100 pounds of milk. The USDA's Economic Research Service, their 2024 cost data comparison, it makes the gap crystal clear.
Okay, lay it out.
Operations running 2,000 or more cows average $23.06 per hundredweight in total costs, $23.06.
Okay, $23.06 for the big guys. Now, what about the small to mid-sized category? The group we're saying is most at risk, maybe that 100 to 199 cow bracket.
For them, the total cost jumps to $32.83 per hundredweight, $32.83.
Wow. Okay, so the difference is?
That difference is the key figure. $9.77 per hundredweight cost difference, nearly $10. And we have to emphasize this. This is a difference that mid-sized farms simply cannot overcome solely with superior management. It's just too big a gap.
You can optimize your feed conversion until you're blue in the face. You can run the most perfect parlor sanitation program. But if your competition is fundamentally starting almost $10 cheaper before that milk truck even leaves your driveway, you're fighting an uphill battle, a losing battle probably.
It's not about your capability as a farmer. It's about the physics of the economics at that scale.
That scale penalty, that $9.77, that is the structural reality that's forcing this consolidation.
Yeah.
I've seen great farmers, really good farmers, driven out of business. Not because they made bad decisions, but simply because the economics of their particular scale just don't work anymore in this global commodity environment.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. And it kind of throws a curveball at that simple get big or get out narrative we hear so often.
How so?
Well, while scale clearly grants that structural cost advantage we just hammered home, It doesn't automatically guarantee efficiency or productivity. The data actually challenges the assumption that scale automatically drives productivity.
Wait, really?
Yeah, we found an incredible 82% productivity gap among some of the world's largest global operations themselves.
Hold on, wait a minute. You're telling me that two dairies, both operating at truly gargantuan scale, both with access to billions in capital, the latest technology, everything can have an 82% difference in milk produced per cow.
That's what the numbers show.
That completely upends the idea that if you just pile enough capital onto a problem, the efficiencies will just, magically materialize.
Precisely. Let's look at the two extremes highlighted in the analysis. Almarai in Saudi Arabia versus Hushan in China.
Okay.
Almarai is consistently hitting 14.000 tons of milk per cow annually. 14 tons. And remember, this is achieved in harsh desert conditions where summer temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius. That's like 122 Fahrenheit. They've invested massively to mitigate that extreme environment.
Okay, 14 tons in the desert. What about Hushan?
Contrast that with Hushan in China, also operating at massive scale, but only managing 7.70 tons per cow.
7.7 versus 14.
Okay.
That's almost double.
It's an 82% gap. That isn't just a rounding error. It's the difference between what's likely a highly profitable operation and, potentially a poorly managed, debt-laden behemoth, despite the scale.
So what accounts for that huge gap then, if it's not just scale?
It's not just the cow breed or the feed price, which is where many people instinctively look. It boils down to management sophistication, detailed protocols, and crucially, human capital.
The people running the show.
Exactly. Almarai, under the leadership of Anthony King at the time this data was gathered, achieved this by controlling variables that the average farm often can't even afford to monitor properly, let alone control. Things like maintaining barn temperatures at a very strict 21 to 23 degrees Celsius, that's 70 to 73 Fahrenheit year-round, regardless of the 50-degree desert heat outside.
That takes serious investment in cooling and ventilation.
Huge investment. And they also track water intake meticulously, providing 300 liters, that's nearly 80 gallons of precision-chilled water per cow every single day.
That's just operational excellence. It's applying industrial levels of precision to biology. Yeah. It really shows that the largest operation isn't necessarily the most successful. The most sophisticated operation is. Okay, I'm definitely not buying that scale is everything anymore. This aligns much better with what we actually see on the ground, even domestically.
Do you have a real-world example that comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I recently spent some time touring a couple of dairies out in the Idaho, Eastern Oregon region. The first was a 600-cow dairy. Not huge by today's standards, but really well run. They focused fanatically on their transition cow management. Every single cow got exactly the right nutrition mix for that critical first 100 days post-calving, and their records were just immaculate, everything tracked.
And the results?
They were hitting 13,000 pounds per cow average, which is phenomenal for that size and system.
Okay, 13,000 pounds at 600 cows. What about the other dairy?
Meanwhile, there was a 5,000 cow facility just down the road. Massive place, big rotary parlors, automated feeders, all the bells and whistles. But they were struggling to hit 11,000 pounds per cow.
5,000 cows struggling at 11,000 pounds. Why?
High staff turnover was a big issue. Inconsistent fresh cow protocols. Things just weren't being done the same way every time across all the shifts.
Yeah.
And frankly, the expensive technology was running way below its potential because the management team just couldn't maintain that consistency across such a vast operation. The tech ended up being a very, very expensive paperweight in some ways.
So the key takeaway here feels a bit nuanced then. Scale does grant that huge structural cost advantage. We talked about the $9.77, the ability to buy inputs cheap, amortize debt over massive volume.
Right, that part is undeniable.
But scale does not guarantee productivity or efficiency. Sophisticated management, really tight protocols, and that integration of technology with skilled people, the human and protocol capital, that still matters more than just the cow count alone.
So if you are a mid-sized farm, maybe 1,000 cows, with truly superior management, your challenge isn't necessarily that the guy with 500,000 cows is inherently a better farmer.
No, probably not.
It's that $9.77 cost gap that the mega operation achieves if, and it's a big if, they manage to get their Almarai level management systems working right.
The irony is maybe the biggest competitor to the well-managed 500 cow farm isn't just any 5,000 cow farm.
It's the highly efficient, incredibly well-managed 5,000 cow farm that has successfully solved that management puzzle at scale. That's the real threat.
Okay, let's break down that $9.77 per hundredweight difference again, because this is where the conversation really needs to shift from just management philosophy to the hard, cold economic reality. When a farmer hears a $9.77 cost gap, the immediate reaction, understandably, is often, okay, I need to cut my feed cost. Or maybe I need to improve my genetics for better feed efficiency.
Yeah, that's the conventional wisdom, right? Because feed is usually the largest variable cost on the farm. But let's just bust that myth right now.
Go ahead.
Dr. Mark Stevenson's research out of the University of Wisconsin Center for Dairy Profitability, it shows that feed cost differences, while they are significant, especially due to bulk purchasing power and maybe feed self-sufficiency on the huge farms, they only account for about $2.50 of that nearly $10 gap.
Only $2.50.
Roughly, yes. So optimizing your feed program, absolutely necessary. You have to do it. But it's nowhere near sufficient to close that entire gap. Not even close.
So where's the rest of it coming from? The other, $7.27 per hundredweight? This has to be the core structural disadvantage we keep circling back to.
It is. And it's pure physics of fixed costs. It's all about spreading those massive fixed infrastructure investments.
Like what?
Like the huge rotary milking parlor that cost millions, the advanced manure handling systems, the land amortization, the interest payments on massive loans, spreading all of that across massive production volume.
Let's drill down on some of those components. Think about financing. A smaller operation building, say a new tie stall barn, or even a mid-sized parallel parlor, they might finance that at standard bank rates, maybe over 15 or 20 years.
Right. Pretty standard stuff.
But a mega-dairy, often backed by institutional investors or getting loans from national banks or even government-linked banks in some countries, they can often secure much lower interest rates, sometimes a full percentage point lower or even more.
Why lower rates?
Because the debt is perceived as safer. You've got huge collateral value, maybe diversified income streams beyond just milk. That interest rate difference alone, compounded over the 20-year depreciation schedule of a facility, accounts for a significant chunk of that $7.27.
That makes sense. And think about specialized equipment, too, like robotic milking systems. A single robot might cost, $200,000? And maybe it serves 60 cows effectively on a smaller farm. That works out to over $3,300 in initial capital cost per cow just for the milking unit.
Okay, now compare that.
Compare that to a massive new rotary parlor. Maybe costs $3 million, a huge number. But if it can efficiently milk 3,000 cows, working 3 shifts a day, the capital cost per cow for the milking infrastructure drops exponentially, maybe down to $1,000 per cow or even less.
That massive difference in capital cost per cow, that economy of scale in the infrastructure itself, that's fundamentally what that $7.20 represents.
Exactly. And when your fixed cost becomes such a huge driver of your total cost in a global commodity market, smaller operations just face this structural disadvantage that even brilliant management excellence simply cannot bridge on its own.
Let's try to quantify the pain for the listener. For a representative, say, 1,000 cow upper Midwest operation, maybe producing around 23 million pounds of milk annually, that $7.27 per hundredweight structural disadvantage, that translates to an additional cost burden of somewhere between $690,000 and $920,000 every single year, compared to their mega competitors who have those lower fixed costs per unit.
$690,000 to $920,000 annually. That amount often exceeds the total historical profit margins for well-run 1,000-cow dairy in many years.
So we aren't just talking about the difference between having a good year and a bad year anymore.
No. We are talking about the potential difference between basic existence and outright insolvency. And again, it's often not a failure of farming skill. It's an economic failure being enforced by the sheer unyielding math of global market dynamics and capital amortization schedules.
And circling back globally, China's stated ambition to exceed 10 tons per cow yields nationally. That's the hammer that's driving this consolidation even faster.
Because if they hit that goal and they continue to displace those hundreds of thousands of tons of whole milk powder imports that the rest of the world used to sell them,
the global price floor just gets lowered for everyone. Less demand, same or growing supply. Prices fall.
Which brings us back, inevitably, to that financial imperative of strategic timing, that 18-month window we started with. This is what we could call the exit cost, or maybe the cost of delaying the exit.
Explain that.
Waiting for the market to rebound, hoping things will get better. It might feel like the responsible thing to do, the optimistic thing. But financially, in this structural environment, it could be ruinous. Exiting now or planning an exit now while your assets are still performing reasonably well before you rack up prolonged periods of negative cash flow. That's how you preserve maybe 85 to 90% of your farm's historical equity.
And the danger is waiting too long, waiting that 12 or 18 months or even longer.
Exactly. If you endure another down cycle, maybe another year or two of these structural losses, that preserved equity might drop to only 70 or 80%.
And if things get really bad, if a producer is forced into a liquidation sale after years of operating in the red,
then they might retain only 20 to 30% of their original equity. Everything gets sold off cheap because buyers know they're desperate. The difference is literally preserving your retirement nest egg versus potentially losing your entire generational investment.
So the strategic move, the tough but maybe necessary move, is recognizing that the decision to exit, if it comes to that, is a business decision, not some kind of personal failure. And the timing of that decision is absolutely everything. Let's look a bit more at how technology plays into this whole picture, because you mentioned it earlier. It's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It really is. Technology offers this incredible promise of hyper-efficiency, precision, maybe reducing labor needs.
So human capital, having the right skilled people, remains the major constraint that often limits its effectiveness, especially on a global scale.
Yeah, remember that example you gave. Beijing San Yuan achieving over 11,500 kilograms per cow annually. That's huge production.
Right. And the key point was they didn't just buy better cows or find some magic feed ingredient. They systematically adopted Israeli management systems. They essentially bought an entire operational expertise package, the whole system.
That is the crucial distinction, isn't it? They didn't just buy the tech. They bought the system and the know-how to actually run it effectively.
And this really highlights the paradox we see everywhere. The technology is only truly beneficial if you have the deep expertise to utilize its full potential. And many operations, large and small, simply lack that specific high-level expertise.
And you had data on that in China.
Yeah, the paradox being quantified. Chinese ministry data showed that only about 7% of their skilled dairy workers possess the really high-level capabilities needed for these complex automated dairy systems. 7%.
Wow. So there's this massive mismatch between the capital being invested in tech and the human expertise available to run it properly.
And this isn't just a China problem. This capital expertise mismatch is pretty pervasive, even in established dairy regions like North America or Europe.
Think about that really high-performing manager you mentioned earlier, the one on the 600-cow Pennsylvania farm hitting 13,000 pounds.
Yeah, great manager.
That individual is clearly highly skilled, deeply knowledgeable about cow health, nutrition, reproduction, but they likely lack access to the capital needed for the really advanced monitoring systems, the fully automated feeding, the full-scale data analytics platforms.
Right. The farm size might not justify the $1 million investment.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the 5,000-cow facility down the road, they can afford the $1 million technology package. But maybe they can't find or afford, or maybe crucially, retain the high-level management expertise needed to consistently interpret all that data correctly and enforce the complex protocols across multiple shifts and hundreds of employees.
So the expensive technology just runs at, say, 60 or 70% efficiency.
Pretty much, which negates a big chunk of the expected cost savings or productivity gains.
Yeah.
The tech doesn't deliver its promise.
So the lesson seems to be, capital constraints often prevent smaller farms from accessing the cutting-edge technology, while human capital constraints often prevent the really large farms from realizing that technology's full potential.
And the missing middle, the 500 to 2,000 cow farms. They often have the best management expertise per cow, perhaps, but the structural economics prevent them from effectively scaling that expertise with the high-end technology. They're caught again.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to the environmental dimension, because scale complicates things massively there too, particularly waste management.
Oh, absolutely. A 2,000-cow operation generates a staggering amount of manure. The analysis says 87.6 million pounds annually.
87 million pounds. That's like 250,000 pounds every single day. Managing that requires industrialized, highly sophisticated systems. You can't just spread that daily with a small spreader.
And the method of storage and handling matters hugely for emissions, particularly methane.
Yeah, the World Resources Institute and others point this out. The large liquid storage systems, the big lagoons or tanks that are common on large farms, while they are efficient for handling that massive volume, they tend to generate substantially more methane compared to, say, daily spread approaches, common on smaller farms where the manure gets incorporated into the soil much faster.
So there's a critical environmental trade-off right there. Operational convenience of the lagoon versus higher methane output.
But here's the kicker. The scale advantage comes back again. Scale allows for a very capital-intensive solution that can actually turn that massive waste problem into a potential revenue center.
You're talking about biogas digesters.
Exactly. Biogas digesters are tremendously expensive. We're talking a $2 million to $5 million investment upfront.
And they only really become economically viable at that 5,000 cal threshold.
That's fair.
Or even higher, right?
Yeah.
Because you need that massive, consistent flow of manure feedstock to justify the huge initial capital costs and the operating costs.
Right. And we are seeing this being utilized globally now, especially where there are incentives. Yuran Dairy in China, one of the giants, reportedly operates 9 large-scale biogas facilities.
So they're taking what used to be a massive cost center, manure handling and disposal, and turning it into a revenue generator.
Potentially, yes. Generating electricity to use on-farm or sell to the grid, producing high-quality bedding or fertilizer byproducts, and crucially, in some markets, securing valuable carbon credits or renewable energy credits.
That is a scale-dependent advantage that the 1,000 cal operation simply cannot access financially. They're forced to stick with the less climate-friendly, maybe, but much cheaper liquid storage solutions, or find other less intensive methods.
And that reminds me of something else often ignored in policy discussions. It's about intensity versus absolute emissions.
Explain that.
Well, while those very large farms, if they install a multi-million-dollar digester, might achieve better emissions intensity, meaning they produce less carbon emission per gallon or per hundredweight of milk produced.
Because they're capturing the methane.
Right. But smaller farms, particularly maybe a well-managed 200-cow grass-based operation, say in Vermont or Ireland, they often have lower absolute emissions overall, just less total pollution.
Because they simply aren't concentrating massive waste streams into those methane-producing lagoons in the first place.
Right.
Their whole system footprint might be smaller.
Exactly. And when policymakers only focus on intensity metrics, which often favor the large scale with digesters, they can inadvertently disadvantage the smaller, often lower absolute emitter. It's a nuance that gets lost.
So scale presents both the highest environmental risk, think massive methane from undigested lagoons, and potentially the highest reward, if you can afford the biogas monetization. But that requires that $2 to $5 million capital investment.
And the missing middle is truly trapped again. They've got too much manure to manage easily through traditional daily spread, perhaps, but nowhere near enough scale to make a digester pencil out financially. Stuck again.
Okay, now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, or maybe the microbe in the bioreactor, the thing that makes that 18-month decision window feel even more urgent.
Yeah, while we're all intensely focused on cow numbers, feed costs, parlor efficiency, the truly massive disruption might be happening completely outside the farm gate, in labs.
You're talking about precision fermentation, PF.
Exactly. And the key message here is, this is not some far-off sci-fi future threat. It is a current reality that absolutely must be integrated into every single dairy farmer's long-term strategic planning. Now,
Okay, let's define PF clearly again, just so everyone's on the same page. Because it often gets confused with things like oat milk or almond milk, which are plant-based drinks.
right, this is different. PF uses microflora things like specialized yeast or fungi, essential programming them to act as microscopic cellular factories.
Factories for what?
Factories to produce specific targeted proteins, in this case, actual whey and casein proteins, the proteins that give milk its unique functional and nutritional properties.
And critically, these proteins are chemically and molecularly identical to the proteins that come from a cow. But the process bypasses the animal entirely. No cows involved in making the protein itself.
And the market is definitely reacting to this technological leap. You just have to follow the money. The Good Food Institute tracks this sector, and they project it growing incredibly rapidly towards $36.31 billion globally by 2030.
$36 billion.
Yeah.
From basically zero just a few years ago.
Yeah, representing an astounding compound annual growth rate of something like 48.6%. The venture capital, the food giants, they are pouring money into this because they see the future potential.
And the products are already commercial, you said, not just lab experiments.
Absolutely. Commercial scale production is happening right now. Companies like Perfect Day are leading the charge, producing these non-animal whey proteins.
So where would a consumer actually find these?
Well, if you've ever tried Brave Robot ice cream, for example, or maybe seen the California Performance Co. protein powders or some specific cream cheese alternatives, you are consuming precision with fermentation-derived whey protein.
And the consumer often can't tell the difference.
Generally not, because molecularly it is the same protein. The functionality, how it whips, how it tastes, how it performs in a food product is designed to be identical.
The investment levels confirm the viability too, right?
Sure. We're tracking over $840 million flowing into these PF dairy protein technologies just in the last couple of years, backed by major institutional investors, big food companies, tech investors. They are betting big that PF will significantly disrupt, if not eventually replace, large parts of the commodity dairy protein sector.
And that's the key term there, isn't it? Commodity protein, whey protein concentrate, caseinates, the basic building blocks.
Exactly. And the cost curves are really the critical factor here. The projections from groups like RethinkX and others suggest potential price parity between PF-derived proteins and conventional dairy proteins sometime around 2027 or 2028.
Price parity in just 3 or 4 years. That's
Wow.
incredibly fast.
It is. And if they hit that target, and the speed of technological improvement in biotech suggests they have a good shot, the projections are they could capture maybe 25%, a quarter of the entire commodity dairy protein market by 2035.
25% market share gone to non-animal sources within about a decade.
That's the potential disruption we're looking at. And it's fascinating to think about the competitive advantages PF has beyond just the eventual price point.
Like what?
Well, first, think about supply chain stability. No droughts affecting feed crops, no heat stress impacting milk yield, no major disease outbreaks wiping out herds, no volatility in feed prices impacting cost of production. It's a much more predictable, controllable industrial process.
Okay, stability. What else?
Second, customization. They can potentially engineer the protein profile exactly how a food manufacturer wants it. Maybe more beta-lactoglobulin, less alpha-lactobumin, whatever is needed for a specific application.
And
Third, the environmental footprint, particularly land and water use. A precision fermentation facility producing protein uses a tiny fraction of the land and water required for traditional animal agriculture to produce the same amount of protein. That's a huge selling point for ESG-conscious investors and consumers.
So even if the price is only equal to commodity dairy, just reaching parity,
investors and large food companies might still favor the lower risk, more stable, more customizable, and arguably more sustainable PF supply chain. That inherent advantage could drive adoption even faster than price alone would suggest.
So the takeaway for the farmer listening is, if you are making major infrastructure investments today, planning a new parlor, maybe a new heifer barn, anything with a 20 or 30-year depreciation schedule,
You absolutely have to factor this into your long-term planning. You have to operate under the assumption that in the latter half of the next decade, a significant chunk of the value of your commodity milk, the protein component, is going to be competing directly against a lab-produced, molecularly identical product that might be cheaper, or at least price competitive, and more stable.
that has to factor into your return on investment calculations. Does this investment still make sense if the baseline commodity protein value drops significantly?
It's a crucial question. And while the U.S. regulatory environment often lags or is, let's say, reactive, we really need to look towards Europe for a potential preview of policy trends, because things that happen there often foreshadow global shifts.
What are you seeing in Europe specifically?
Well, the EU's overarching farm-to-fork strategy is pushing hard towards specific targets, like aiming for 25% of agricultural land under organic production by 2030. That creates a massive potential premium market for those who can meet the standards, but it also inevitably raises compliance costs and pressures for conventional farms.
Okay, organic push. What else?
But the truly drastic measure, the one that really shows the level of intervention possible, is what's happening in the Netherlands.
The nitrogen issue.
Exactly. The Dutch government allocated a staggering 25 billion with a B specifically for livestock farm buyouts.
They're paying farmers to leave the industry.
Essentially, yes. It's state-sponsored consolidation aimed at drastically reducing national nitrogen emissions, particularly near sensitive environmental habitats. It's not just a suggestion or a market trend, it's an active government intervention designed to physically shrink the national herd by buying out producers, especially in targeted areas.
It's extreme.
It is. And look at Germany, too. They're imposing increasingly strict space allocation requirements for certain welfare certifications. Things like needing 6 square meters of indoor space plus another 4.5 square meters of outdoor access per cow.
That fundamentally changes the economics of traditional confinement systems, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just raises the structural cost of production dramatically if you have to provide that much space per animal.
Absolutely. So these European regulations aren't just gentle market pressures. They are significant government interventions that are actively accelerating the structural shift, pushing against traditional, densely concentrated dairy farming models, and favoring either very extensive systems or potentially creating more space for alternative protein sources. The pressure is mounting from multiple angles.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've got the massive $9.77 structural cost disadvantage for mid-sized farms compared to the mega-dairies. We've got the management sophistication gap. We've got the environmental pressures and the biogas cost barrier. And now we've got the looming disruption from precision fermentation potentially hitting price parity within a few years.
Right. So given all that, the core message for those operations caught in that missing middle, maybe the 500 to 2,000 cow farms, it feels brutally clear from this analysis. Simply staying the course, hoping things get better, is likely a path towards slow-motion bankruptcy.
You have to actively choose a different path. You can't just tread water anymore.
Exactly. And the analysis highlights 3 potential proven escape routes out of that middle ground. 3 distinct strategies.
Okay, this is crucial. What are the 3 paths for someone facing that 18-month decision window? This is about preserving equity now.
Path 1 is leveraging the cooperative premium.
Path 2 is committing fully to value-added diversification.
And path 3, the often difficult but sometimes necessary one, is the strategic exit.
Okay, let's dissect path 1 first, cooperative premium. How does that help bridge the gap?
This path offers potentially the most immediate, lowest capital-intensive way to improve your margins right now. Research, particularly from Cornell's Dyson School, consistently demonstrates that the best-managed, highest-performing dairy cooperatives can deliver a significant price advantage, maybe 8 to 12% higher pay price, compared to selling milk independently on the commodity market or being part of an underperforming co-op.
How do they achieve that premium?
Through superior bargaining power with processors, effective marketing and branding of pooled milk, maybe better component pricing, and sometimes dividends or equity returns.
Okay, 8 to 12%. Let's put that in dollars. For that representative 1,000 cow farm we talked about, what does that mean annually?
At 8 to 12% premium could translate into an immediate revenue bump of roughly $200,000 to $300,000 per year.
Wow. Okay, that's significant money. That's enough to close a very large portion of that structural cost gap we identified earlier.
Exactly. So this path is really about choosing your business partners wisely. It's about aligning yourself with the best performing co-op in your region, not just necessarily the closest processor or the one your family has always shipped to.
All right, but I need to hear the practical farmer pushback on this one.
Yeah.
Is it really as simple as saying, okay, I'll just switch co-ops tomorrow and get that 12% premium?
What are the hurdles?
Well, first off, I'm not buying the simplicity of it at all. In many regions, the milk market is already pretty saturated. Finding a top-tier co-op that is actively taking on new members, especially larger farms that might disrupt their balancing or trucking routes, can be really difficult. They might not want or need your milk.
Okay, market access challenge. What else?
Yeah. Second, there's often significant political and logistical difficulty in switching. You have long-standing relationships, maybe capital investment like equity tied up in your current co-op, and there's usually a lengthy notice period required, sometimes 6 months or even a year before you can leave.
So it takes planning.
Absolutely. And crucially, remember that same Cornell pricing analysis. It also found that the underperforming cooperatives, the ones at the bottom of the pack, were actually paying out about 3.5% less on average than the typical investor-owned processors.
So switching to the wrong co-op could actually make your situation worse.
Precisely. You have to do meticulous due diligence. You need to benchmark your current co-op's performance, their pay price, their deductions, their equity programs against the best in the region. You need to know objectively if you are currently paying a penalty just by being part of your current system.
Okay, so path 1 isn't a simple switch. It's a high-stakes investigation and potentially a complex transition. Let's move to path 2. Value-added diversification. This is often held up as the dream, right? Become the local artisanal brand.
Yeah, path 2 focuses entirely on dramatically improving your margin per unit of milk rather than just chasing commodity price. And the potential gains here, according to European research cited, can be really significant.
How significant?
We're talking potential margin improvements of 36% all the way up to 150% through things like on-farm cheese making, yogurt production, bottling fluid milk for direct sale, ice cream, you name it.
Can you give a specific example?
Yeah, the analysis mentioned small-scale cheese production in Europe generating something like 0.688 That's maybe 75 US cents more profit per liter of milk compared to just selling it as fluid commodity milk. That's a huge difference.
Those margin numbers are incredibly tempting, obviously. But playing the practical voice again, why are you skeptical that this is the magic bullet solution for the majority of farms stuck in the missing middle?
I'm highly skeptical that this is scalable for the majority, primarily because while the potential margins are high, the barriers to successful entry are absolutely immense.
What are the main barriers?
Well, research out of Ireland from Nuffield scholars show that something like 95% of dairy farmers, despite being excellent, highly skilled experts at cow management and milk production, simply lack the necessary different skill sets. Marketing, branding, sales, logistics, food processing regulations, business development, all the things required for a successful value-added transition. You're essentially moving from being a primary producer to being a manufacturer, a distributor, a marketer, and often a retailer, all rolled into one. It's a completely different business model.
And the timeline just doesn't seem to match that urgent 18-month decision window we keep talking about.
Not at all. The realistic path to profitability for a new value-added dairy business typically takes 5 to 7 years. You need serious, often diversified capital investment up front. You need to develop or hire an entirely new skill set within your operation. And you realistically need a 5-year financial runway, maybe subsidizing the new venture with the old one, before you start seeing consistent positive returns.
So if your farm equity is already eroding right now due to those structural commodity pressures,
launching a complex, capital-intensive, slow-return, value-added business is probably not the immediate fix you need. It's more like a potential long-term, maybe even generational project if you have the resources and the risk tolerance.
okay, so for many people realistically facing this 18-month decision point, if path 1, switching co-ops, isn't feasible or doesn't close the gap enough, and path 2, value-added, is too slow or requires skills they don't have, that leaves path 3, the strategic exit.
And we need to frame this correctly. This isn't about giving up or failing. This is purely a rational business decision focused on optimal timing and responsible asset management to preserve wealth.
We circle back to that financial data. Proactive strategic timing preserves 85 to 90% of your farm's equity. But we need to explain how that works in practice.
A strategic exit means you conduct an orderly, planned asset sale while the farm is still a going concern, not when you're financially distressed.
What does that look like?
It means maybe you sell the land separately, potentially at agricultural value, or maybe even capturing some development value if you're near an urban area, while the farm is still operational and looks good. You sell the milking herd and the young stock through a well-marketed, scheduled dispersal option to maximize prices from other producers who want good genetics. You sell the equipment line through an organized auction or private treaty.
Instead of
being forced into a rapid, distressed liquidation sale where buyers know you have to sell, you're desperate for cash, and prices just plummet across the board, that's where you see equity evaporate down to that 20-30% level.
And the analysis mentioned a documented case study illustrating this point.
Yeah, the example from southern Wisconsin. A producer who saw the writing on the wall had around $850,000 in calculated farm equity. By planning and executing a strategic transition before losses mounted, they successfully preserved over $700,000 of that equity for their retirement and potential new ventures outside of dairy farming.
That is absolutely not a failure story. That is astute business management, recognizing that the economic structure no longer supported their specific scale of operation and acting decisively to protect their family's financial future.
And this all drives towards that rather stark 2035 vision presented by IFCN and other analysts, which serves as the final warning, really.
What's the projection?
The projection is basically a bifurcation of the industry. They see maybe 40% of global milk production eventually coming from just 300 to 500 highly efficient industrial-scale mega-dairies, huge operations.
40% from a few hundred farms. Okay. Where does the rest come from?
Another 35% is projected to come from the very smallholder systems, primarily in South Asia. Think India, Pakistan, driven mostly by local population growth and local consumption patterns, operating on a completely different economic model.
Okay, that's 75%. What's the remaining 25%?
The remaining 25% is projected to come from precision fermentation and other non-animal dairy alternatives, capturing that commodity protein market share we discussed.
So you add that up, the structural cost disadvantage pushing from below, the rise of PF pushing from the side. What happens to that missing middle, the traditional 500 to 2,000 cow family farm that's been the backbone in many regions?
In that 2035 scenario,
Yeah.
they essentially vanish. They get squeezed out. They're unable to compete effectively on the commodity scale against the mega-dairies, and maybe unable or unwilling to secure a premium niche market large enough or profitable enough to sustain them long term.
So the economic pressure will simply force them to choose one of those three lanes, scale up massively, niche down significantly, or exit strategically probably within this tightening 18-month window, or face a much harder forced liquidation over the course of the next decade as these trends play out. The stakes are incredibly high. Yeah. # actionable insights segment. All right, let's bring all of this analysis down to ground level. The listener, maybe they just finished morning milking, perhaps they're driving to the feed store right now, or maybe they're sitting down later today heading into a tough meeting with their lender. What are the absolute key actionable things they need to take away from this deep dive?
We need 3 clear targeted actions based on different timeframes. Something to do immediately, something for the medium term, and a crucial long-term positioning decision.
Okay, let's start with the immediate. What's action number 1, something they should look into this week?
Immediate action this week. Evaluate your co-op or processor's performance. This is potentially the fastest, lowest capital way to find immediate margin improvement.
How do they do that?
You must objectively compare your current cooperative's actual payout performance, your net pay price after all deductions, against known public metrics or benchmarks for your region, like the research done by the Cornell Dyson School or similar university studies if available locally.
And the goal is to find out.
The goal is to find out. Is your co-op truly delivering that potential 8 to 12% premium compared to the baseline? Or are you unfortunately stuck in an underperforming group that might actually be paying less than nearby investor-owned processors? If you discover you're losing, say, $200,000 in potential revenue annually just because your current co-op consistently underperforms the regional average, that's massive equity erosion. You might be able to stop relatively quickly just by starting the due diligence process now to identify and potentially transition to a higher performing partner.
Yeah.
Don't assume your current situation is optimal.
Verify it.
That's critical, yeah. Know your numbers relative to the best. Okay, what about the medium term? What's action number 2? Something to focus on over the next, say, 3 to 6 months.
Medium-term strategy. Next 3 to 6 months. Audit your operational efficiency and protocol discipline. And the key here is do not rush into expansion right now just for the sake of getting bigger. Not yet.
Instead, focus intensely on eliminating any internal productivity gaps first. Maximize the efficiency of the cows and assets you already have. Remember that 82% productivity gap between Almarai and Hushon. You need to be on the Almarai side of management sophistication, regardless of your current size.
So what does that look like practically?
It means rigorously reviewing and tightening your management protocols. Replicate the precision of the top performers. That means absolutely meticulous transition cow protocols, nutrition, health monitoring. It means optimizing the cow's environment as much as possible within your budget heat abatement, consistent access to clean water. And it means treating your record keeping not as a chore, but as a critical profit center, using data to drive every decision.
Remember that Idaho example?
Yeah.
The well-managed 600 cow farm outperforming the 5,000 cow farm.
Exactly. You need to strive for that level of management precision, that level of sophistication, even if you can't match the mega-dairies cow count. Driving up your internal efficiency is your only real buffer against that $9.77 structural cost penalty coming from the outside. Maximize what you can control.
Makes sense. Get your own house in perfect order first. Okay, finally, the big one. Long-term positioning. What's action number 3? The decision that really defines the next decade and, as you said, preserves wealth.
Long-term positioning, next 1 to 2 years. Decide your lane, set your timetable, and assume price parity. This is the strategic choice. You have to commit fully and strategically to one of those 3 paths we outlined.
Remind us of the paths.
Path 1, scale aggressively and efficiently, likely aiming for 2,500 plus cows, specifically to achieve that fixed cost leverage. Path 2, commit wholeheartedly to a substantial, verifiable premium niche. Maybe it's A2 milk, maybe it's certified grass-fed, maybe organic, maybe direct local marketing, something that realistically adds $300,000 plus in annual premium revenue to your operation. Or path 3, plan and execute a strategic, orderly exit to preserve your equity before it erodes further.
And you added a crucial new variable to consider in this long-term planning.
Yes. And this is critical for any major capital investment decision from this point forward. All future infrastructure planning, new parlors, new barns, major equipment purchases must be done assuming basic price parity for commodity dairy proteins, whey, casein, with precision fermentation alternatives by roughly 2027 to 2028.
So run the numbers assuming that happens.
Exactly. Ask yourself, will this new facility, this big investment, still pencil out? Will it still break even or be profitable if the fundamental value of commodity protein in my milk is significantly pressured downwards by these lab-grown products within the next 5-10 years?
If the answer is no,
then you probably shouldn't build it. Or you need to factor that risk heavily into your financing and payback calculations. The time to incorporate that future reality into your planning is right now, within that 1-2 year decision window. Don't wait until price parity actually hits. Plan for it.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to think about, but incredibly important. Choose a path, get ruthlessly efficient, and plan for the coming protein disruption.
That sums it up pretty well. It's about proactive strategy, not reactive panic.
This has been another deep dive from the deep dive. If this kind of no BS analysis helps your operation make better decisions, definitely head over to www.thebullvine.com. There are more articles there that really tell you what's happening behind the scenes in dairy.
And seriously, subscribe to the show wherever you get your deep dives. We're actually releasing these twice weekly now, hitting different critical topics each time.
And trust me, you really don't want to miss what we've got coming up next week. We're going to dig into the surprising real-world cost differences between handling manure with liquid systems versus daily spread systems. And maybe more importantly, we'll assess the actual viability of carbon credit programs for mid-sized farms.
Yeah, the big question. Can those carbon programs realistically help close that structural cost gap we talked about today, or are they turning out to be just another empty promise for most producers? That's what we'll tackle next time.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Bullvine Podcast. We hope today's discussion helps you see the broader forces at work and gives you practical ideas to meet this rapidly changing moment. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with your fellow producers, leave a review, or reach out to us at thebullvine.com with your feedback and questions. Remember, your decisions shape not only your business, but the future of the entire industry. Stay informed, stay resilient, and join us next time for more real talk from the front lines of dairying. Take care and keep milking the possibilities.